So now that you know how different the community builders were from the curbstoners, let's take a look at a couple of famous cases that you may even know or have visited yourselves. The first example, according to some historians, was Roland Park, created by the Roland Park Company in Baltimore starting in 1891 at what was then the urban fringe. In this depiction from a few years later, you can see a streetcar in the lower left of the image, indicating that it's well served and that you can get to the CBD from there. But everything else suggests that residents will live somewhere in the English countryside. If you're interested, I highly recommend Paige Glotzer's book from last year, which uses Roland Park as a case study and shows how its builders transitioned from operating without racial covenants in the early years to adopting racial covenants in the early 19-teens, to embracing the city's racial zoning and subsequent low-density single-family zoning from its founding all the way out to the mid-1900s. One of its main advantages over Weiss's story is that she treats racial capitalism and structural racism as being central to the story of Roland Park, and by extension to the rest of the Community Builders project. Another famous example is the Country Club District, which was built by J.C. Nichols in suburban Kansas City, spanning areas in both Missouri and Kansas. These historical photos emphasize the level of investment that the community builders would engage in as they brought in urban services and amenities to these new residential suburbs. Nichols knew that only the elite would be able to afford to live in his new community, and that they wouldn't want to pay for such comfort without a guarantee that their homes would be protected. As a result, racial covenants were ubiquitous, along with restrictions on lot sizes, uses, bulk, and sale prices of houses to be offered in the area. Throughout this period, there was a debate about whether zoning would pass muster, especially after the Worth versus Selden decision overturned racial zoning. Like racial zoning, use zoning faced concerns based on the Fifth Amendment that it would unconstitutionally take private property without due compensation, and that it would deny people of their due process rights. While many community builders and early city planners would have wanted national legislation on land use, the Constitution had never said anything about land use. This means that land use regulation was an issue for states to decide by the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, which you can read here and you ought to review if you don't know it. The community builders were therefore delighted when Commerce Secretary Herbert Hoover created an advisory committee in 1922 to develop model legislation that states could adopt if they wanted to for both zoning, which first appeared in 1926 in this, it was actually 1924. This is the 1926 revisions to the Standard State Zoning Enabling Act, and Subdivision, which is the main thing that the 1928 Standardized City Planning Enabling Act is about, no matter what it says about planning. The committee, which had persistent members and a few new ones over this course of the decade, was packed with early luminaries from city planning, plus community builders, realtors, and landscape architects. Over half of the states adopted this enabling legislation after that, and in many states it remains to this day the main state authorization of zoning and subdivision control. This is a really important set of regulations or standards for states to adopt, because they put municipalities in complete control of whether to adopt regulations at all, and if so, what they would look like. In short, this is a national model that provides a handoff approach to local regulation. And that, as you might well guess, provides a perfect vehicle for the spread of exclusionary zoning after World War II. Next up on our run of show today are two more readings, an article by Sonia Hurt, plus the US Supreme Court decision on the Euclid versus Ambler case of 1926, plus the 1924 ruling that the Supreme Court overturned with the 26 Euclid versus Ambler decision. Here are a couple of things to be looking for in these two readings before you get started.